Shalom. Welcome. I'm Rabbi Scott with Beth, Yeshua, Messianic Synagogue, and here from our home to welcome you to our midweek Torah study. This is a time when we get together with you in this format here and go through the Torah portion with you. A couple administrative business items, if you will, to begin with. Beth Yeshua Messianic Synagogue here in Fort Myers. If you would like to join us, if you'd like to fellowship with us, then we would encourage you to come. We do get quite a few visitors from time to time, so you would be welcome, and I'm sure it would be a delight for you. Likewise, also, if you want to connect with me, you'll find my email address in the comments below in the description of the video. If you want to reach out via comments, that's good too. Would love to discuss and dialogue with you folks on the content of the Parsha and the content of the discussion. We thank all of you for who have subscribed, who are subscribers. If you're a subscriber to our YouTube channel, then you get notifications for our Revelation teaching, for our Shabbat services, etc. So we encourage everybody to subscribe so that you can stay up and get the notification when these videos are ready. Likewise, for those of you who support us and continue to support us, we're just very, very grateful. If you would like to support this ministry, you'll find instructions in the description as well to do that. Okay, let's begin. This week, the Torah portion is number 6, Parsha 6. It is Toledot, which means history, or the generations history. It comes from Bereshit, Genesis chapter 25, verse 19, through chapter 28, verse 9. Okay, so these are the generations of Isaac, Abraham's son, indicating a continuity, the fulfillment of the promises and the covenant with Abraham. Remember the promises that that Adonai had given to Abraham, all revolved around the covenant and the promise, the covenant of the land and of the descendants, that Adonai was going to bring to Abraham, land and descendants. The land was going to be apportioned out and described, but Adonai revealed it to Abraham in his lifetime. So we are continuing that theme here in this current Parsha. The Parsha goes on to talk about how, we're just going to kind of summarize the Parsha real quick here, and then we'll go back and get into some detail. But we see that Rebecca is barren, that Isaac prays for her, and Adonai answers his prayer. Again, continuing this theme of miraculous conception in the life of Abraham and Sarah, and then here again with Isaac and Rebecca. She conceives, and it appears that there are two peoples in her womb that are fighting, that are in conflict of some kind, such distress that she says this phrase, why should I bother? Why should I keep on going? What is the purpose of this? And so when they were born, there are two sons, Esau and Jacob. Esau came out like a man, fully hairy, with reddish skin. He came out fully, almost like it says, like a garment. He was that hairy. Jacob came out holding on to his brother's heel. Later, Esau says he was rightly named after the heel. The word for heel in Hebrew is be'achev, in the same sentence, achev in Hebrew. Jacob is Yaakov in Hebrew. So you see the closeness to the term heel. So he was named for the heel, which in our vernacular, in our speech, would be it's a derogatory term. Not necessarily derogatory in the same sense in the Hebrew or in that culture of the time. So what does Esau mean that Jacob is rightly named, Yaakov is rightly named? What is the shape of the heel? The heel is a bend, it's bent. The heel is a crooked point in the leg. And so we have this that Esau says that Jacob is rightly named, in that Esau's perspective is that Jacob was crooked, that he was bent. Esau becomes an outdoorsman. He becomes a man of the field, a hunter. You get the sense that Esau was a man's man. He was a rugged guy. Jacob, it says, lived in tents and was a mild-mannered man. So we have the juxtaposition, the contrast between these two characters. And so you get a sense that, yes, Esau was a man's man and Jacob was not that per se. And then we have this line that Esau was favored by Isaac, but Jacob favored Rebekah. So one day Jacob had cooked a stew, and Esau came in from the field from hunting and said, "Give me some of your stew." And in the ensuing discussion, Jacob negotiates for the birthright. It says that Esau scorned or despised the birthright. Then in the Parsha we have this: there's a famine in the land. Adonai instructs Isaac to stay in the land, to live as a sojourner, do not go down to Egypt. Adonai confirms the covenant of Abraham upon Isaac. Isaac stays in Gerar, but deceives Abimelech about his wife, in an echo of what Abraham also did to Pharaoh, lying about his wife. So we see this, that following that, Isaac is blessed by Adonai. He becomes exceedingly wealthy. It says he planted a field and reaped 100-fold. That's a return of 10,000% for those of you who are in stocks and bonds. That's a pretty significant return on investment in such a short term, one season. So Isaac is on his way to becoming exceedingly wealthy. Isaac and Abimelech enter into a covenant. And then we read that Esau takes 2 wives from the Hittite people, and that they caused bitterness to Isaac and Rebekah. And that's all the backstory. Now we come to the event that really truly shapes much of what happens in the next 20 or so chapters of the Torah. And that is the deception of Jacob. Most people know the story. But I want to introduce a concept here that we're going to be working with in the next few weeks at least, and revisiting from time to time. And that concept is what's called the Bechor. Bechor is the Hebrew word for the firstborn. And it has ramifications and relevancy to even all the way into our modern times. So I'd like you to follow me on this, because there's a lot that we have to unpack regarding this Bechor in order to make sense of it and see what I believe Adonai is seeing and showing us for these times. But here in this context, we have this terrible event where Isaac seems to be deceived by his son. So let's go through the story. Isaac calls for his favored son Esau. Isaac is nearly blind here. He says, I don't know when I'm going to die. Go hunt for me, prepare for me, and I will bless you. So this is the blessing that a father would bestow upon his child. Rebekah overhears this. Esau goes out to get the game, and Rebekah jumps into action. She instructs Jacob, and she uses this language when she instructs Jacob, listen to my commandments and do what I tell you to do. It's very specific. She's exhorting him and emphatic and strident. You must do what I tell you to do. Rebekah instructs Jacob to take some food and then to put on goat skins to imitate the hairy skin of Esau, and to go in to Isaac and to get the blessing in the place of Esau. So Jacob does indeed do this, and then Isaac blesses Jacob. We're just summarizing it at this point. And Jacob goes out, and immediately Esau comes in. Isaac trembles with the realization of what has just happened. Esau weeps for the loss of his blessing, and so Isaac gives Esau another blessing. Esau goes out and swears that he will kill his brother. Rebekah sends Jacob away to her family in Padan Aram in Haran. But first, before he leaves, Isaac blesses Jacob. Esau sees the additional blessing to Jacob, sees that Jacob is instructed to take a wife from Rebekah's family. So Esau goes and takes 2 more wives, this time from Ishmael's people. Okay, so that's kind of the summary, point by point, 2 minutes or less, walk through the Torah portion for this week. So at the first reading of this, we have to be honest, and we're shocked and appalled at what's happening. We thought Rebekah was a pillar of kindness. We thought that Rebekah was like Abraham in her kindness that she demonstrated first toward the servant at the well, and then toward Abraham's servant at the well, and then towards Isaac when she went to be his bride. But we think of her and her kindness. She was kindness in a way that was unlike all the rest of her family, unlike Laban and her family. So what's happening here with this deception? Let's go back to the original premise, which is the prophecy. Rebecca is distressed about the two that are in her womb, distressed to the point of death, it says. And then we have this prophecy. She inquired of Adonai, and Adonai spoke to her. Vayomer Adonai lashenei goyim bevitnech u'shnei le'umim memech iparadu ule'om milom ye'ematz v'rav ye'avod tza'ir. So it says this, Shnei goyim bevitnech. There are two nations in your womb, the goyim, nations. Ushnei le'umim, the two peoples. Ushnei le'umim, two peoples. And then it says this, Mimech yeparadu, they'll be divided from you. And then the next line, Ule'om milom ye'ematz, one will be stronger than the other. And verav ya'avod tza'ir, the greater will serve the younger. Most translations will say this, that the older will serve the younger. But the text in the Hebrew is not so explicit, and that's why I wanted to read that to you word for word in the Hebrew. The word for younger in this text is tza'ir, and it says at the last line, ya'avod tza'ir, serve the younger, which is translated commonly as younger, insignificant, lesser, these sort of things. But the other word in that line, the verav ya'avod tza'ir, ya'avod is the service, like the avodah of the priest, the service, ya'avod tza'ir, the younger. But the verav is better translated as greater and not older, and that's why you see in some of the literal translations, the greater will serve the younger. And if it's better translated as greater, not older, or many, or more numerous. In the Torah, used often for older, it's a kane. In the Torah, the word we see for older, it's a kane. Another reading of this prophecy would be that the greater will serve the lesser, or the greater will serve the insignificant. So it would be easy to say that the greater is going to be the firstborn, because that's the paradigm, that's what we're thinking of. The greater is going to be the firstborn, and I understand that. But we have to be careful that we don't read this with the idea that we know the end from the beginning. We have to be careful and also consider it from the perspective of the people involved, and that's going to be very important in this passage. We have to read it also pretending we don't know what's going to happen. What would Rebecca's perspective be at this moment? What is she hearing when Adonai says to her, the greater will serve the younger? Well, she's hearing that the greater would be the older, and the lesser would be the younger. We know we know the end of the story. We know that Jacob is the one who continues the line of the blessing of Adonai, the blessing of the land and descendants. We know that, but Rebecca doesn't know that at this time. We have to practice an active ignorance about the future and read it as if you're there firsthand playing it out. At best, the prophecy is a little ambiguous. Yes, you can read it, you can conclude, okay, the older will serve the younger. You could come to that conclusion, but I think you have to acknowledge that it could also be worded differently. Next, I want to look at the wording when Esau trades his birthright for a bowl of stew. And I have to be honest about this. In the past, I had always taught this and interpreted it this way, that the birthright and the blessing were distinctive. That when he scorned the birthright, it was kind of a separate event. It was kind of a separate thing that happened. And here, the blessing is something that we would attribute more as the Bechor. But that's actually not what's happening in the text. And actually, this was a result of my conversation with my wife this week. We were discussing this, and then I went and looked, and sure enough, The word for birthright here is bechor, ha-bechorah, the Hebrew word bechor. So let's go to chapter 25, verse 31. Esau has asked for a bowl of that red stuff over there, that stew, and Jacob says to him, "Sell me your birthright to me today." Esau responds, "Look, I'm about to die. Of whatever use is this to me, a birthright?" Jacob says, "Make a pledge to me now." So he made a pledge to him. He sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank. Then he got up and left. So Esau despised his birthright. The word here in the Hebrew is the ha-bechorah. Many of you folks have heard me teach on the Bechor, and we're going to circle back and talk about the Bechor in our services, in our teachings on Shabbat in the future. But for now, the Bechor means the firstborn. The Bechor is the elder son who gets a double portion. The Bechor is the one who receives the spiritual inheritance and the legacy from the father. Let me describe it this way. If you had say a man had a plumbing business, and he had grown this plumbing business up, and it had become quite the business, and it was very profitable, and had multiple employees and maybe multiple locations. He's been very successful. And he's getting to the age of retirement, and he looks across at perhaps he has like 4 sons, and he looks across at his sons, and he says, which of my sons is going to take this business and perpetuate it and go ahead and run the business? Who should inherit the business? Well, you might say it should be the firstborn, but what if the firstborn is an artist and has no interest in plumbing? And what if the second is in the military and has no interest in plumbing? And the third works on Wall Street but has no interest in plumbing? Who is going to inherit the legacy, the heritage of the father? Who is going to be the Bechor? And we find that it's the 4th son who has an interest in plumbing. He wants to carry on the family name. He wants to carry on the family business. He's interested in this, and so he steps up and becomes the Bechor. Imagine that in spiritual terms, such that you have a father who has a spiritual focus for his family, a spiritual gift that he gives to his family. He's the spiritual head of his family. And of his children, some are more or less interested in spiritual things as he is. And the question is there, who is the Bechor? Who's going to be the Bechor? And it may not be the firstborn who takes up the mantle, who takes up the anointing, if you will, of what his father's legacy was going to be. So this is what the word Bechor means. Another meaning of the Bechor, though, is that of the firstborn. It is the elder children in a family, especially a large family. It's the elder children who teach the younger children how to behave. I mean, sure, the parents are there to discipline, but it's that there's a psychology there by which the elder children influence the younger children because they've gone through this before, and they know how the family works, and they know what it means, and they know what the expectations of the parents are. So the children are learning from the parents, but they're also learning from the elder children. And there's very much a passing down of knowledge and understanding and insight from the elder children, especially the oldest, to the younger children. So that also is in the Bechor, in the idea of the Bechor, in that the elder brother, or the one who takes on the mantle of the Bechor, is the one who's going to teach the other children about the spiritual disciplines, spiritual beliefs, the spiritual values of the parents. And so that's another meaning of this Bechor. And when you read here that Jacob scorned the Bechor, when you read this, then we come to understand this a little differently. Like I said, I used to teach this, that the birthright meant that he was going to get the double portion and perhaps the first portion of his father's wealth. But no, it's more than that. It's who's going to inherit the legacy. And it talks about it right here, and that is the blessing of Abraham, that God had for Abraham. In chapter 26, we have this. Adonai says to Isaac, "Live as an outsider in this land. I will be with you always. I will bless you. But to you and to your seed I have given all these lands. I will confirm my pledge that I swore to Abraham your father. I will multiply your seed like the stars of the sky." These are things that Adonai said to Abraham, and here he is saying it to Isaac. I will multiply your seed like the stars of the sky. I will give your seed to all these lands, and in your seed all the nations of the earth will be continually blessed, because Abraham listened to my voice, kept my charge, my mitzvot, my decrees, and my instructions. So Isaac obeyed. Isaac stayed in Gerar. But the question could be asked, where is Ishmael in all this? Why didn't Ishmael receive the blessing of Abraham? Why didn't Ishmael receive this kind of blessing? Because he didn't take up the mantle, because he didn't take up the anointing of what it meant to be a son of Abraham, and what it meant to inherit the blessings and knowledge of God. Because this is what it says: Abraham listened to my voice, kept my charge, my mitzvot, my decrees, and my instructions. So that's a relatively thorough summary of a man who's given his life to God. All right. So, going back to this scorning of the birthright, the Bechor, that Esau does. Following this episode is the deception of Isaac at the hands of Jacob and Rebekah. And this story is very troubling. We have Jacob here, whom we are told is a man of truth. And Jacob becomes Israel. And Jacob becomes the father of the 12 tribes. This one to whom Adonai appeared. I have my conclusion on this passage, as I'm sure all of you have conclusions and opinions. This is my thought, that, first of all, the prophecy that came to Rebekah was ambiguous. It was an unknown. There was room for interpretation. And this is my understanding on it, that actually there was room at that point for the two brothers to come to grips with who they were going to be. They were going to decide who was going to be the superior leader, who was going to be the Bechor, who was going to take up the anointing, the blessing that Adonai was going to give. There was room for that to happen. Now, we know what happened is Esau made his choice. He scorned the birthright. And so he left a vacuum there. And Jacob steps into that vacuum saying, sell me your birthright. And so he did. So moving on, now we have the story of Rebekah and Jacob conspiring to take the blessing. But think of it from Rebekah's perspective. Consider from Rebekah's perspective on this. Sometimes when we read the text, it's hard to read the text because we know the end of the story. What if Rebekah had understood the prophecy to refer to Jacob? And what if Rebekah felt that Isaac favored Esau, but Adonai was going to favor Jacob? We've seen this before. Remember when Adonai told Abraham that he would have a son by Sarah, and Abraham said, oh, that Ishmael might live before you. We have indications that Abraham favored Ishmael. He certainly seemed quick to obey when Adonai called him to sacrifice Isaac. We have this one line from chapter 22. Adonai says to Abraham, take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac. Just so there's no misunderstanding, remember your son, not Ishmael, Isaac. Remember your only son, not Ishmael, Isaac. Remember the son you love, not Ishmael, Isaac. Do you see there? You have to, at least for me, ask the question, why was it necessary to be that specific and then, Isaac? Just so you know who we're all talking about here, it's Isaac. Abraham, who was willing to negotiate for the salvation of Sodom on behalf of 10 righteous men, does not negotiate or seem to even hesitate when Adonai calls him to sacrifice his son. So, considering all this together, does Abraham favor Ishmael? Does Isaac favor Esau? We know that from the text. It says that explicitly. So let's assume that Rebekah sees the future. She sees that Esau, with his pagan wives, is not going to be the Bechor. Then we see that Esau scorns the Bechor by selling it for a bowl of soup and a crust of bread. Then we see that Isaac calls for his son Esau. He says, I don't know when I'm going to die. Here, go get me a meal of game and I will bless you. This is one of the possibilities, that Rebekah sprang into action because it was required that she spring into action to save the line of Abraham, to save the blessing, to save Isaac from making a terrible mistake. But perhaps the real failure is the way that she and Jacob went about it. She went about it in a way to deceive rather than dealing with it openly. All right, so what I want to do is I want to look at these three blessings. The three blessings from Isaac. Jacob comes in, and he's wearing Esau's clothes, and he has the meal prepared for Isaac, and Isaac blesses him. This is blessing number 1. There's actually going to be 3 blessings here. We're going to look at these blessings. 3 blessings. No, this is number 1. This is when Jacob first comes in and he's pretending to be Esau, and Isaac doesn't know that it's Jacob. Isaac thinks it's Esau. Remember, Esau can't see at this point. And he says this. Here's blessing 1. Behold, the smell of my son is like the smell of a field. In other words, Esau is the one who lives in the fields. May God give you the dew from the sky and from the fatness of the land an abundance of grain and new wine. That's what a good blessing you would give for somebody who lives in the field, somebody who's a hunter, somebody who's a man's man. May peoples serve you, and may nations bow down to you. Be master over your brothers. May your mother's sons bow down to you. May those who curse you be cursed, and may those who bless you be blessed. So Jacob goes out, and Esau comes in, and as soon as he realizes what has happened, Isaac trembles violently for what had been done, and Esau is distraught, and we have this classic line, "Bless me also, O my father." And so Isaac does indeed bless him. Blessing number 2. Behold, away from the land's fatness shall your dwelling be, away from the dew of the sky above. By your sword you shall live, and your brothers shall you serve. But when you tear yourself loose, you will tear his yoke off your neck. So after this, Esau consoles himself with thoughts of killing Jacob. And Rebekah is going to send Jacob away to save his life. And then we have blessing number 3. Isaac blesses Jacob before sending him away. This is blessing number 3. Again, this is Isaac blessing Jacob, knowing that it's Jacob. So Isaac called for Jacob, blessed him, commanded him, and said to him, this is verse 3. Now may El Shaddai bless you, and make you fruitful, and multiply you, so that you will become an assembly of peoples. May he give you the blessing of Abraham to you and your seed with you, that you may take possession of the land of your sojourn, which God gave to Abraham. I think we need to look at the context of these blessings to understand what has happened here. Let's look at it from Isaac's perspective. Consider this all from the perspective of Isaac. What is Isaac seeing and thinking? And, well, he can't see because he's blind, but what is his perception of things? Number 1, he thinks that he's blessing Esau in blessing 1. We know this because he trembles violently when Esau shows up. So he thinks that he's blessing Esau in blessing number 1. He knows that he's blessing Esau in blessing number 2 because Esau has told him, "It's me, bless me also, O my father." Only in blessing number 3 does he think or know that he's blessing Jacob. Now, of the 3 blessings, which blessing would you call the greatest blessing? Let's go back up and I'll just read through these real quick. Blessing 1. Behold, the smell of my son is like the smell of a field that Adonai has blessed. May God give you from the dew of the sky and the fatness of the land abundance of grain and new wine. People will serve you. Nations bow down to you. You will be master over your brothers. Mother's sons will bow down to you. Okay, that's blessing 1. Just kind of reading through it quickly. Blessing 2. Behold, away from the land's fatness shall your dwelling be. By your sword shall you live, and your brother shall you serve. But when you tear yourself loose, you will tear off his yoke off your neck. That's blessing number 2. Blessing number 3. Isaac called for Jacob, blessed him. Now may El Shaddai bless you and make you fruitful and multiply you, so that you will become an assembly of peoples. May he give you the blessing of Abraham, to you and to your seed with you, that you may take possession of the land of your sojourn, which Adonai God gave to Abraham. So, which is the greatest blessing? And I would submit to you that the greatest blessing in this list is the blessing of Abraham. This is the blessing of the Bechor. This is the true inheritance and legacy from Abraham. Why didn't Isaac give Esau the blessing of Abraham in blessing 1? So it begs the question, if Esau has come in, and this is the blessing before Isaac dies, and this is the end of all things, and we're winding down to things. Why didn't Isaac give Esau the blessing of Abraham? And that's in blessing one. Let's look and ask the same question. Why didn't Isaac give Esau the blessing of Abraham in blessing 2? He had 2 chances to give it to Esau, and he refused. He didn't give him that blessing. It's almost as if in this narrative, in this story, there's unfinished business. It's almost as if there's this blessing of Abraham is being held in Isaac's hip pocket, and he's going to pull it out when he's good and ready. Isaac had 2 chances to give that blessing to Esau, and my conclusion is that, therefore, Isaac never intended to give the blessing to Esau. In other words, he deliberately withheld that blessing, the blessing of Abraham, until he was blessing Jacob. And he knew that he was blessing Jacob. If Rebekah had just been patient, perhaps everything would have worked out. Or if Rebekah had been able to communicate with Isaac, perhaps she would have realized, oh no, I'm not giving him that blessing. I'm giving Esau a blessing, but I'm not giving him that blessing. In any case, Rebekah thought she was saving the plan of Adonai because Esau was such an unwilling receiver of the blessing. And now what we have, the stage is set for the Bechor. We have set the stage for the Bechor. Who is going to be the Bechor? It wasn't Ishmael, it was Isaac. It wasn't Esau, it was Jacob. Who's going to be the Bechor of all the sons of Jacob? We're going to discuss this as we go in the coming weeks, in the next few weeks. The ultimate understanding of the Bechor has profound implications for the kingdom of Adonai today, vis-a-vis Messianic Jews and Christian Gentiles. If you want to do some reading and some thinking about this, read through the narrative of Joseph with the question of the Bechor in mind. Who is the Bechor? Reading the entirety of the nation of the people of Israel in Joseph, both before and after he arrived in Egypt. So that is some homework for you. If you want some extra credit, you can have that. You can do that. But we're going to talk about this as we go, because this does have implications, profound implications for the kingdom of Adonai today. So again, one of the lessons here this week in the Torah is learning to read this from the perspective of the characters who were living it, and being able to connect with what they saw and felt and what must have been part of their calculus at the time. Stay tuned. More to come. We're going to be addressing this more and in more detail as we come in the days ahead. But again, thank you for joining us. May Adonai bless you today, and may Adonai give you the gift and the blessings that he has in mind for you in everything that you do, in all your places. Again, if you have any questions or would like to discuss this further, please reach out to me in the comments, and it would be good to dialogue with any of you. Thank you for joining us on this day, and may Adonai be with you. Shalom, shalom.